Please rise for the Philippine National Anthem, to be followed by the French National Anthem.
Bayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Bayang mahimik, kalasan silangalan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Upang inilang, kuya ka ng mahimik, sa handulupin, di ka masisipin, sa nagatang tugon sa silangalan. Himayan sa langit ko magaw, may hinagang tularaw, isang pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang pagkawal ko'y tagumpay na nag-iiging, ang bituin at karoon niya kailan huwag ay mag-iiging. Tuwan ang araw ng warhagit pagsinta, buhay langit sa pag-ibig mo. Ang bigaya ng pantay mga aking, at mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
All right, please be seated. Good morning to our distinguished guests from the government, the diplomatic community, the private sector, the academe, and think tanks. Welcome to our forum on Friends and the Philippines, strengthening cooperation for the protection of marine biodiversity. I'm Joyce Reyes. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for External Affairs of the Stratbase Institute, and I'll also be your host for today. So this event is organized by the Stratbase Institute in partnership with the French Embassy in the Philippines. And this event is also a hybrid event. So thank you very much for joining us here in the venue. And thank you very much as well to everyone who's watching us live via Facebook and Zoom. All right, so as part of the Blue Nations France and Philippines Partners for the Oceans Initiative, this conference is actually already the second in the Blue Talk series dedicated to marine biodiversity protection. And we are holding this forum today when we are also observing World Environment Day. That is why it is just very timely to highlight the urgent need for collective action to protect our oceans and ecosystems, especially with the 2025 UN Ocean Conference happening soon. As a maritime nation, the Philippines continues to push for marine conservation amid ongoing challenges such as limited resources, enforcement issues, and geopolitical tensions. And we are committed to working with like-minded nations or partners in promoting a rules-based, sustainable regional order. And France is a key partner in this effort, offering global leadership in ocean governance and extensive experience in managing marine protected areas. With territories in both the Pacific and Indian Oceans, France brings valuable expertise to Indo-Pacific marine conservation. We have a very interesting morning ahead of us today, so without further ado, to formally commence today's forum, please welcome Stratbase Institute President, Professor Victor Andres Bindo Manhit, to deliver the opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to our partner. Thank you, Ambassador Marie, for supporting this initiative with your embassy. For the past 20 years, and exactly maybe a little past 11 years, we sat in this club with my members of the board of trustees, and I said, we need to bring people together. Private sector, government, the international community. And we had our first event in the bigger room, the turf room. And I'm happy that this tradition, this vision continues. So I welcome everyone because what we see in this room today are people both from private sector, government, civil society, and the diplomatic community and international community. Thank you for always supporting our initiatives. Our oceans have long shaped the country's history, culture, and economy. As our lifeblood, securing the seas and ensuring their sustainability is a critical concern that demands our nation's attention and collaboration. At the Stratbase Institute, we continuously assess the evolving geopolitical and geoeconomic landscape of the Indo-Pacific. We identify this year in 2025 8 key risks and opportunities shaping our country's future. Relevant today is the intensifying impacts of extreme weather, natural disasters, and climate crisis, which underscore the urgent need for strategic climate action. As a maritime and archipelagic nation, the Philippines is one of the 17 mega-diverse countries in the world. Located at the heart of the Coral Triangle, our mangrove forests, seagrass beds, and coral reefs function more than just ecosystems. They support fisheries, our fisher folks, our fishing communities, making sustainable management a national priority. But these ecosystems face severe threats, such as plastic pollution, not necessarily coming from the Philippines, but because of our archipelagic nature of our country, it can flow from other countries. Illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, climate change impacts disrupt marine and coastal ecosystems. Weak enforcement of environmental laws also hinders efforts toward marine protection and conservation. Most notably, the illegal entry of foreign vessels into Philippine waters has emerged as a critical threat, causing extensive habitat destruction and an alarming depletion of marine resources. For the Philippines, the 2016 arbitral ruling set a strong precedent for its like-minded partners like France, facing similar maritime pressures, highlighting the Philippines' legal strategy as a model for maritime governance. This was, and I remind everyone, a landmark victory, signifying the power of international rules-based order that invalidated China's 9-dash line, 10-dash line, or according to our Secretary of Defense, 11-dash line in his speech last weekend, holding them accountable for environmental violations under UNCLOS. We give credit, given there's too much politics the past few months, to the Philippine Congress. It took some years, but they were able to pass 2 key laws aligned with the UNCLOS award, which strengthen our legal foundation for maritime governance, national security, and sustainable resource use. I'm referring to the Maritime Zones Act that defines our maritime boundaries, while the Archipelagic Sea Lanes Act regulates the passage of foreign vessels through Philippine waters. These laws, as President Marcos Jr. emphasized, reaffirm the Philippines' commitment to protecting marine resources, preserving biodiversity, and securing livelihoods for future generations. Our survey that we conducted towards the end of last year with Pulse Asia shows strong public support for modernizing the armed forces to defend the West Philippine Sea. But I wanted to emphasize support the modernization of the armed forces of the Philippines to protect our territory and marine resources. And we wanted to emphasize that. We at the Stratbase Institute stand at the forefront of protecting our seas, preserving its biodiversity. Ongoing environmental damage, especially from illegal reclamation and aggressive intrusions, must stop. However, the Philippines cannot do this alone. To protect our seas, to secure our seas, it demands a whole of society approach. Strategic collaboration with state agencies, public sector, private sector, and international community ensures continued efforts towards a blue economy and a stronger support for a rules-based order. This morning, let us leverage our science-based policies, marine industries, ideas from these policies in driving our conservation efforts towards sustainable ocean governance. Thank you so much for joining us, and sorry for the inconvenience because there's so many of us here, but we're thankful that we're all here together. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Professor Manhit, for that very insightful opening remarks. And to share another special message, it is an honor to have with us today the Ambassador of the Embassy of France in the Philippines, Her Excellency Marie Fontanelle. Let's give her a round of applause, please.
Good morning. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Bonjour. Happy World Environment Day. Indeed, this is the day, and that's why, dear friends, dear partners, it's a true pleasure to be with you today and to have planned with the help of Stratbase, and thank you so much for your introductory remarks, dear Dindo, this fourth edition of the Blue Talks, and the second one dedicated to biodiversity protection and to the ways in which France and the Philippines can work together to advance this vital cause. Exactly 1 year ago, and it was already, not by coincidence, the World Environment Day, the French Embassy launched this Blue Nations initiative, France and the Philippines Partners for the Oceans. This program we designed aims to strengthen our bilateral cooperation in the maritime domain around 3 key pillars: the protection of the marine environment, the development of the sustainable blue economy, and maritime defense and security. All this with an eye toward the upcoming United Nations Conference on Ocean, which France will co-host with Costa Rica from June 9, in a few days from now, to June 13 in Nice. So here we are, 1 year later. In just a few days, indeed, France will welcome over more than 80 heads of state and also approximately 200 ministers coming from all over the world to work together towards a renewed and strengthened governance on our oceans. Some of you will perhaps participate in this conference or are already involved in its preparation events. I'm particularly thinking of the scientists who have gathered since yesterday for the One Ocean Science Congress running through June 6 tomorrow. The Embassy is proud to have supported the participation of 3 distinguished Filipina researchers, and we look forward to hearing their feedback and insights when they come back. 10 years after the COP21 and the Paris Agreement, the Nice Conference represents a critical milestone in ocean governance, and the ambition is really clear, let me remind us all, to bring together United Nations member states, the international scientific community, specialized agencies, civil society, but also the private sector and global donors to define concrete actions that match the scale of the challenges we face. Just as the Paris Agreement marked a turning point for climate action, the Nice Ocean Action Plan will provide a universal framework where scientific knowledge informs and guides political decisions. In addition to the adoption of this action plan, one of the central goals of UNOC 3 is the entry into force of the BBNJ Treaty, Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, also called the High Seas Treaties, at the conference. The BBNJ Treaty is an opportunity to take the urgently needed measures in areas already under threat from climate change, pollution, illegal activities, and emerging activities like deep sea mining. We had hoped and still hope that the Philippines will be part of the first 60 ratifications needed for the 20 to come into force. But we know, of course, that the Senate has also many things to do these days. Anyway, I have at least the possibility to praise the three Micronesian states, Marshall Islands, Palau, Federated States of Micronesia. I'm also ambassadors to those states who will be represented in Nice at the level of heads of states and which have been among the first to ratify the treaty. So we hope that the treaty will be able to come into force after the Nice conference. The ocean is, of course, one of the planet's richest reservoirs of the biodiversity, home to an estimated 500,000 to 10 million marine species, many of which have yet to be discovered. One thing we know for sure is that this largely unexplored biodiversity is nevertheless essential to many ecosystem services, including food production, climate regulation, and coastal protection. That is why biodiversity preservation lies at the heart of the Blue Talk. Here in the Philippines, this issue is even more central, of course. We discussed it at length last October during the first biodiversity-focused Blue Talk. The Philippines is a global hotspot for marine biodiversity. We saw that, an ecological treasure, but also among the most vulnerable countries, facing increasing threats such as overfishing, pollution, plastic pollution being one, habitat degradation, and sea level rise. In this context, dialogues such as today's are essential to foster collaboration and shape common solutions. With this in mind, the French Embassy, in partnership with the Stratbase Institute, launched last April a joint study led by Dr. Carmen Lagman de La Salle University and Dr. Joachim Claudet, a French researcher and specialist of marine protected areas. These ongoing studies seek to explore new pathways for enhanced bilateral cooperation in protecting both marine biodiversity. It will lead to actionable recommendations to support the actions of our two countries. And we are fortunate today to welcome one of the co-authors who will share with us in a few moments the key insights from this promising work. Thank you, Madam. I would like to warmly thank Professor Victor Andres Manit Dindo, President of the Stratbase Institute, as well as your entire team for your consistent partnership. I would like also to extend my gratitude to all our distinguished speakers today, researchers, public officials, and civil society representatives for joining us today. We gather here with a shared conviction. The future of our societies is closely tied to the health of our oceans. The Indo-Pacific region, a crossroads of our histories and of our futures, is one of the world's richest centers of marine biodiversity. Together, being Pacific blue nations, we have both the responsibility and the capacity to promote innovative policies, to share expertise, and to expand protection of our oceans as our common good. This is not only about preserving nature, it's also about supporting coastal communities, ensuring food security, safeguarding regional peace and stability in accordance with international law and with a commitment to sustainability. So I wish you the best for this morning session, this fourth Blue Talk. We are approaching the moment where we will see the results of all our joint efforts in Nice next week, and we will meet afterwards to share the outcome. But so far, I wish you a very fruitful discussion for this morning. Thank you so much for being so many present in the room here today. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Marie. And on behalf of the Stratbase Institute, we would also like to thank Ambassador and the French Embassy for this very meaningful partnership. All right. And as the Ambassador said earlier, two leading French and Filipino think tanks are currently developing a very important joint policy brief about marine biodiversity. These think tanks, the Institut Francais de Relations Internationales and the Stratbase Institute, are currently developing a joint brief which outlines practical steps to boost scientific, institutional, and diplomatic cooperation on marine biodiversity. And to tell us more about this joint policy brief that they are currently working on, we have with us today one of the authors of this brief. She is a non-resident fellow from the Stratbase Institute and also a full professor from the De La Salle University Manila's Department of Biology. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Dr. Maria Carmen Lagman.
Good morning, everyone. I'd just like to note that the work is still in progress. And what I will be sharing with you today is the thinking that has gone into this in the past few weeks as we tried to bring it together, and how we are actually framing how the policy recommendations are going to come through. Okay, so we had the title, and the title is this: Local Voices, Global Commitments. France and Philippines on the path to 30 times 30. Next slide, please. So we all know that the marine environment is very important to the existence of humankind. 70% of the Earth is actually water, the oceans. And even if we had oceans, without biodiversity, we will not survive. We will simply be an empty desert. That ocean supports over 2 million marine species unnamed yet. And since it's unnamed, their potential value and benefits have not been derived. What we now have is what only is the top, I'd say the top of, the iceberg tip of what is really out there. It's essential source of oxygen. As we know, 70% of what we actually breathe comes from the ocean. And the ocean is responsible for much of the recycling of many of our nutrients, including nitrogen, absorption of carbon dioxide. And can you imagine, it's the biodiversity that actually does that. I go back to the idea that if we still had the ocean but had nothing in it, it is useless. So it protects the coastlines and mitigates impacts of natural disasters. We've heard about the stories, particularly this summer, when whole communities were actually saved from things like Ondoy, Yolanda, and more recently, the very devastating surges of water in that area. So now we also understand that it underpins livelihood, human health, and well-being. Not just because of what it can produce for us, but because of its intrinsic value culturally, spiritually to humankind. Next slide, please. So here is a diagram we derived from a recent paper, Framework Program for Research Innovation, done by the European Union. And you could see the real struggle between the demand for services from the sea, the oceans, from us, and what it can actually supply. And looking at it from a perspective of supply and demand, we are really going to be in a very big dilemma because we cannot control the supply. We can only control demand. And if we look and continue at what we're doing right now, we are consuming right now and how we're demanding from the supply right now, we will really be in very big trouble. Next slide, please. So France is a major player and is a custodian of a huge part of these biodiversity, given it is the second largest territorial areas that have the resources that we're talking about. Next slide, please. And the Philippines is just the same. We are in the center of marine biodiversity, an area called the Coral Triangle, where much of what we actually have is also due to the whole of the world, not just us. Next slide, please. So we are all signatories to these international agreements. We start from the Sustainable Development Goals for life underwater, the Convention on Biodiversity, the UNCLOS. All of these agreements are mutually signed by both our countries. And because of that, we are actually committing ourselves, though no one is actually testing us, checking us, evaluating us, whether we are filling our commitments. We have willingly been part of the global community that says we will support the move to keep our planet safe and to continue the existence of humankind. Particularly of this very prominent among these agreements is the recent Global Biodiversity Framework under the Convention of Biological Diversity. Next slide, please. That agreement is said to be similar to the Paris Agreement for Climate Action and parallel to that. Given these 23 targets within that agreement, the Philippines and France, our governments, have basically said, we will help in building these targets. Up on the top will be creation and preservation of biodiversity, conservation and preservation of biodiversity. And the programs that have been put into place for this. Just to talk about the GBIF a little bit more. So it's an initial roadmap, aims for 16% marine coverage under the National Integrated Protected Areas System. That's what the Philippines has committed to by 2030. By September 23, DNR had several discussions with many of our stakeholders, and part of the very big prominent provisions for the new GBIF is the inclusion of indigenous knowledge and indigenous people. So the GBIF targets, the Global Biodiversity Framework targets, are really central to the next programs of our National Biodiversity Plan. Next slide, please. So if we talk about GBIF, we have all of these, 30% of the Earth's biodiversity preserved by 2030. And that's the basis of what has become a catchy phrase, 30 by 30. And that the plan extends to about 2050. In the Philippines, our main way of preserving marine is through marine protected areas, because we have very high diversity, unlike some other areas in the globe where we can do species-based or gear-based, species-based or fishery-based management. Our biodiversity is just so high, and the way that we are exploiting is very diverse, that management really has to be ecosystem-based. Next slide, please. So here is the general map of what is currently preserved, what we call OECMs, other ecosystems managed aside from marine protection area in the world. And it has not been growing very much since 2018. What we have right now has a very small part of what we aim for, which is 30 by 30. So the process of actually the process of expanding this is one question. The other is to monitor whether what we have declared has actually been preserved. Are we effective in where we are saving these areas? So one of the marine protected area management is one of the main means of preserving biodiversity. Next slide, please. But there are other biodiversity strategies. And if you look at this slide over here, we have area-based conservation measures. We also have species-based conservation measures. We have ecosystem-based management, which is central to many of the coastal management plans. We have marine spatial planning. I think this area has been taken up more recently by our neighbors, like Malaysia has established its own national marine spatial plan. And then there's restoration and rehabilitation, which is species-based in some areas, but for others it will be areas. And then there's the blue economy and sustainable use approaches. And finally, international agreements and frameworks. Next slide, please. So given all the options that we have before us, Dr. Claudette and I are actually looking at what would be the most prominent among the list of the things that we've listed to you already, given what is now occurring nationally and what we have as national biodiversity conservation plans, national protected area plans, and where the data is actually lodged and available. Because these are the areas that will actually help us to figure out the two things we were talking about earlier. One is how much of the area is being preserved and how much of the use is actually quantified, as opposed to how much of the demand, that's the demand side, the supply side, how much of it is growing and what is it giving to us. And part of that supply-demand discussion on resources and biodiversity in terms of services will be cooperation among agencies, among academics, among industry, because all of us will need to actually, we think we need to figure out that kind of situation right now for where we are. The benefit of working with France is they have a lot of expertise and a wider geographic extent for all of these kinds of questions. How much of that would apply to us would also be a very interesting question within it. So if we're talking about strategies of how to move forward, what we will now have to figure out is how we can work together to prioritize our actions, putting into the document that we will now be putting together, and then creating action plans, particularly for multi-sectoral, multi-government, multi-industry demands for these resources. So your comments on where we're going would be very useful, particularly given this publication that actually shows where the difficulties are going to be. We already are the benefits of a lot of work that other people have already framed, worked, and created into our systems. And that would then be in the governance, in engaging stakeholders, understanding ecosystem-based management itself, and communicating marketing, technology, and data. So I look forward to actually coming up with a plan that can be eventually executed. Doesn't have to be us, it definitely has to be everybody else who is in this room. So your comments, your participation, and your eventual engagement in what comes out from this will be very much coveted. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lagman. May we request a quick photo opportunity with Dr. Lagman, together with Professor Manhit, please, Ambassador Fontanelle, USEC CP David also, if you can join us, and Commodore May Marfil, please. Once again, thank you very much, Dr. Carmen Lagman. And we are looking forward to reading the final joint policy brief. All right. So we will now proceed to our first panel for this morning, which will focus on advancing marine ecosystem protection through innovative and data-driven approaches. We will have a panel of experts who will share with us valuable insights on how innovative approaches, strong partnerships, and data-driven strategies are reshaping the protection and management of marine ecosystems. With growing threats to coastal and marine habitats, Combining environmental data, local knowledge, and collaboration across sectors is essential for effective ocean governance. So allow me to call on our first speaker, who is the Undersecretary for Integrated Environmental Science at the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Undersecretary Carlos Primo C.P. David.
Thanks, Joyce. Good morning, everybody. As I stand here before you today, I wanted to show you a video made by one of the underwater videographers, Bugs Rosales, for the DNR. And now I'm realizing that as I show you the beauty of our marine ecosystem, I run the risk of none of you listening to anything that I will be saying because this video is simply mesmerizing. In any case, this is what we are trying to protect. Whatever the reason would be in terms of protecting it, whether it's for aesthetic value, whether it's for food security for our communities that rely on the marine ecosystem, or for whatever purpose, this is what we stand to lose if we do not protect it. I hope somebody listened to that statement as you watch this. The approach of our department has always been the same with all other forms of natural resources, whether it's terrestrial forest, water resources, critical minerals, or even just our land. The approach, together with the marine ecosystem, is the same. The very first step is to be able to map out what we have, account for the natural resources that we have. And we have done that for all the other resources. And it's only this year that we are starting to map out ourselves, our coral reef areas and seagrasses. We've completed last year the map for mangroves. And so we are building on that by mapping out our coral reefs and seagrasses. The second step to our approach is to create enabling policies so that we are able to carry out our mandate of protecting these ecosystems more effectively. Together with these policies are, I think, effective projects that have been started by Sec Tony Loizaga. We continue to maintain the 75 marine protected areas of the country. And this is over and above all the fish sanctuaries and the local marine protected areas that we have. On top of this, for this year, and this is where stakeholders may be able to, that I may be able to join in working with the DNR, is that we are actually putting up 6 marine research stations all around the country. And this is very well open to research and our partners now in this particular effort. Other than the marine protected areas and our marine research stations, of course, there's a lot of planning that's ongoing in terms of marine spatial planning in order for us to map out parcel by parcel what we have in our oceans. By the way, this video also serves as my timer, a 5-minute timer, so my time is up. Finally, I wanted to mention to everybody, I'm sure in everyone's mind, you're thinking, what will be happening because we are transitioning to a new secretary. And Sec Tony, to her credit, has started so many new projects other than the marine research stations and all these planning that are ongoing. We actually are implementing a task force, an oceans task force composed of 18 scientists. This is a new group in the DNR, 18 scientists and advised by the very best marine scientists of the country, 6 of them. I am pretty sure that the new Secretary Lotilla, will continue all these projects now, and we remain to do these projects not only as part of the legacy of Sec Tony, but as everyone here knows, this is something that we own and we should benefit from not only today, but moving towards the future. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Yusek CP David, for that very interesting speech. Yusek CP was actually my professor in college for natural science. And yes, from UP, I always look forward to his classes because they're always very interesting. So we also look forward to the open forum later on for more discussion with Yusek CP. All right. So our next speaker is a professor of the University of the Philippines Marine Science Institute, Marine Biodiversity Resources and Information Systems. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Dr. Arturo Uwisma, PhD. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Good morning, everyone. You can't protect what you don't know. That's an oft-repeated axiom in biodiversity conservation. But when you come to think of it, that's also a challenge to generate that knowledge and to communicate that knowledge to various stakeholders. The Marine Science Institute of the University of the Philippines is at the frontier of various research initiatives in the field of biodiversity. Our researchers conduct studies that cover various facets of biodiversity, but what I'm going to highlight today is one, innovation. It's actually a package of innovations related to information collation and dissemination. And this is a facility that the Marine Science Institute is launching, which is called the Marine Biodiversity Resources and Information System. It is meant to be a platform for collaboration built on data that is national in scope and that is directly relevant to efforts in biodiversity management. So the mission of this EMBRIS is to enhance capabilities to document and sustainably utilize marine resources through the following: maintain, grow, and digitize biodiversity collections, develop a marine biodiversity data analytics platform, conduct cutting-edge collaborative biodiversity research, provide training and education for ocean sciences literacy, and support national and local level policy formulation. Its vision is to be a hub for collaborative research across different institutions in the country, research, expertise, knowledge, and training to catalyze management and conservation of marine biodiversity. So its main features are laboratories where various institutions can come and collaborate. And so this is related to molecular ecology and genetics, marine natural products and biotechnology, marine chemistry, and biodiversity informatics facility. EMBRIS will also house collections of various biological resources, including marine fishes collection, marine invertebrates collection, hard corals collection, marine microalgal culture collection, phycological herbarium, marine natural products collection, seaweed gene bank, the Bulina Marine Laboratory Museum, and the Marine Macroalgal Reference Culture Collection. Let me mention some specific innovations that MSI in general and EMBRIS in particular will be implementing. One is the mainstreaming of genomics. In other words, we are making use of sequences of entire genomes from organisms. Why is this important? In contrast to traditional approaches where genetic diversity is measured by snippets of the genome, there are information that you can get by looking at entire genomes rather than just snippets of them. One is fine-scale population structure. We know how population structuring is important in management of fisheries and biodiversity in general. Another important information that we can get from genomics is the identification of cryptic species. They may look the same. They may also look genetically the same based on fragments of their genome, but when you look closely, they're actually there's an underlying genetic diversity. And then another important aspect of genomics is appreciation of holobionts. Organisms don't exist just by their lonesome. They are actually an assemblage of various organisms that form a tightly integrated living system. Corals is a good example of that. And then, of course, the appreciation of pangenomes, where we are all, same species, Homo sapiens, but if you look at our genomes, we differ, but there are things that are highly conserved, but there are core, so those are the core sections of our genomes, but there are things that differ, and that might underlie all our differences. Another important innovation is the mainstreaming of eDNA or metabarcoding, where we employ these techniques to capture as much resolution as possible of the diversity in our environment, in this regard, the marine environment. There are so many things floating in the water that you can't see by your naked eye, or that you can sort of capture and view using your microscope. But you can see them, and you can, even those that cannot be cultured, they become visible by doing metabarcoding or eDNA. And we know that diversity is not just a matter of genetic diversity or species diversity, it's also a matter of chemical diversity, which is particularly important for people who wants to sort of capitalize on our resources for the benefit of the people. And that's why we are also employing techniques like metabolomics to sort of see and understand and discover the chemical diversity in the marine environment. And to tie all these things together, we're also developing an information and collaboration hub. So the focus of this effort is data collation. There's a lot of historical data, and there's a lot of ongoing research that generate data, and we want to capture all of them to make them available to stakeholders. And more importantly, to make them available for analysis and for communication. The scope is national. So we want, and the major advantage of this is that nobody else will be able to make this data available, because nobody else has this data, because we'll be capturing data not only from published work, but also from reports and from all sorts of information that our researchers here in the Philippines are generating. So we will create a platform for general analytics of data, for those that are structured data, but we'll also be leveraging generative AI for analytics that would make the information available to the general public, because it will be possible for them to converse essentially with the system, but the underlying database should be solid. Of course, there are challenges that we'll be sort of addressing as well. We are aware that our efforts will not be kind of isolated. We have to sort of, for example, we have to consider the fact that we have to abide by certain policies and rules. For example, the access benefit sharing. So we will design the system so that it will be easier for the researchers to be more accountable to the public regarding the research, and for the public to be able to sort of essentially keep track of the resources in the Philippines that have been sort of discovered by these researchers. And also the concept of digital sequence information, which is, as we know, has become an important concept in biodiversity conservation, because this can provide a mechanism for essentially access and benefit sharing. But we know that this is very challenging because on the one hand, given the sort of framework for generating data and sharing data, we know that we have to share molecular information or DNA sequence information. But we know that there's an imbalance in the capability of nations to make use or take advantage of or other things. So essentially, that's all we sort of essentially the list of innovations that we are planning to implement. This is just the beginning, and we hope that we'll be able to provide this as a platform and as a resource for everyone interested in marine biodiversity in the country. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Arturo Luisma. Our final speaker for this panel is the Senior Conservation Impact Manager of the Wildlife Conservation Society. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Ms. Marian Saniano.
Good morning, everyone. It's a privilege to join this timely and important conversation on advancing marine ecosystem protection. I speak today on behalf of the Wildlife Conservation Society, where we work in more than 50 countries with local communities to safeguard nature's stronghold or areas of high ecological integrity. In the Philippines, we help protect biodiversity and support communities in richly diverse yet increasingly vulnerable coastal and marine areas. This forum underscores a simple truth. The health of our oceans depends not on isolated efforts, but on collective action rooted in shared data, shared goals, and shared accountability. Our marine ecosystems are under growing pressure from overfishing, habitat degradation, climate change, and unregulated development. The question we face is not just how we protect more, but how do we protect smarter? This is where innovation and data come in, not as an abstract concept, but as tools grounded in the real-world challenges of ocean governance. At WCS Philippines, we are increasingly seeing the power of data-informed decision-making in action. For example, high-resolution habitat mapping and spatial modeling are helping local governments and communities identify areas of ecological importance or biodiverse areas for protection and management prioritization. In particular, we leverage use of Marine Ecological Research Management Aid, or MERMAID, as an efficient tool to collect, analyze, and share ecological monitoring data. This allows quicker assessments of reef health and supports high-resolution habitat mapping and modeling. Using these tools to assess sites combined with local consultations and municipal partnerships demonstrates how science, local knowledge, and policy can come together to produce lasting conservation outcomes. In response to the 4th Global Coral Bleaching event, we collaborated last year with the Marine Environment and Resources Foundation, De La Salle University, and Silliman University to conduct bleaching surveys in key areas in the Bohol Sea. Using MERMAID, we were able to visualize and analyze data in preliminary results suggest that coral reefs in Bohol Sea appear to be to show higher resilience to bleaching stress compared to some surveyed areas in the Sulu Sea. This does not diminish the ecological importance of the Sulu Sea. Rather, this comparative data underscores the need for tailored management responses across different seascapes, recognizing their unique vulnerabilities and strengths. Information like this is essential in guiding targeted conservation strategies and building climate resilience into local management plans. But technology is only as good as its integration with people. That's why cross-sector collaboration with local fisherfolk, national agencies, civil society, and national and international partners is at the heart of our approach. Technology provides the tools, but it is people and partnerships that drive change. For example, we are currently working with the national government and various stakeholders to finalize the National Coral Reef and Recovery Program, which aims to integrate science-based restoration strategies with local community stewardship to enhance the resilience of coral reef ecosystems nationwide. On the ground, in our project site in Siquijor, we are updating MPA and fisheries management plans to reflect both area-based and species-specific conservation needs, such as for sharks and rays, and the protection of increasingly vulnerable ecosystems, including coral reefs, mangroves, and seagrass beds where these species depend. To ensure long-term sustainability, we are working to harmonize benefits for people's organizations that co-manage these sites, assisting with their legal registration, enhancing financial and organizational capacity, supporting sustainable funding mechanisms for Bantay Dagat, and strengthening local governance. This includes aligning land-based policies and practices that have downstream impacts on marine ecosystems, creating a more integrated ridge-to-reef approach. Importantly, innovation must also serve as equity. We must ask, are these tools accessible to local governments? Are communities equipped and supported to engage with meaningfully? In many parts of the Philippines, basic infrastructure such as reliable electricity, internet connectivity, and access to digital tools remains uneven, which limits how and whether communities can benefit from technology-driven solutions. Importantly, innovation must also serve as, at the same time, we must recognize that conservation and innovation cannot be separated from the broader context of human well-being. Many communities face daily challenges in meeting their basic welfare needs. These realities can constrain their ability to participate in conservation efforts, much less adopt new technologies. In a country where governance is decentralized, our greatest strength lies in the empowerment of LGUs and people organizations. But this empowerment must be matched by investment in infrastructure and social support systems to ensure no one is left behind. If innovation is to be truly transformative, it must be designed with local realities in mind, bridging digital and social divides, supporting hands-on training, addressing welfare gaps, and enabling sustained, inclusive engagement in environmental stewardship across multiple levels and layers. France and the Philippines both have vast coastlines and a shared commitment to ocean stewardship. This forum gives us a chance not just to exchange ideas, but to build alliances, scientific, political, and community-based, that enabled innovation to scale equitably and effectively. Let me end by saying, data alone does not protect the ocean. People do. But people empowered by good science, strong institutions, and international cooperation, that's where real change happens. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Marian Saniano. I think at this point, we can now proceed to our panel discussion. All right, or are we still waiting for the chairs? All right. So while we're setting up, I would like to remind everyone that if you have questions for our speakers for today, you just feel free to ask them. You may just raise your hands, and that also applies for our audience who are with us via Zoom. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box on your screen, and I think our colleagues from the Stratbase Institute will be able to send them to me later on. All right, are we ready now? I think, yeah. So may I call back on stage for our panel discussion? USEC CP David, Dr. Arturo Luisma, and Ms. Marian Saniano. And I will also be joining the panel as the moderator in my capacity as the Deputy Executive Director of the Stratbase Institute. All right, so let's all take our seats now. Or, okay, sure. I'll sit here. All right, okay. Very interesting.
Parang thesis defense.
Thesis
Nakabahan ako.
Makaganti na ako sa prof ko dati. All right. Very interesting presentations from our experts here, from our environment experts. You talked about the different technologies that would be very helpful in our marine biodiversity, but maybe you can tell us more. What innovations or technologies do you see as most critical for scaling the coverage and effectiveness of marine protected areas in line with the 30 by 30 target? Maybe with Dr. Luisma first. Technology, sir, that you see are most critical for scaling the coverage and the effectiveness as well of our marine protected areas in line with the 30 by 30 target?
I would imagine that the traditional approaches are still very useful, but the advent and particularly the fact that the cost of DNA sequencing has gone down provides us with the opportunity to leverage that technology to have a higher resolution way of capturing information. So for example, when you talk about the impact of marine protected areas, whether it's providing seed to other areas that might not be sort of directly measurable using censuses, for example, you can use eDNA because you would be able to have evidence that indeed there's this distribution of species, even if you can't really see the fish, migrating.
All right. Yes, sir.
On our part, in 2023, the DNR established a new office called the Geospatial Database Office, which leverages on key technologies such as remote sensing, GIS, and AI. In fact, our coral mapping initiative is with the Philippine Space Agency. And this collaboration actually really worked well together with our stakeholders on the ground in mapping our mangrove map. And so we're hoping that the same procedure will also be effective in mapping coral reefs and seagrasses.
And Ms. Marian, would you like to add some more?
So as I mentioned earlier, we are advocating for the use of Mermaid. It's a free tool that can easily or quickly provide assessment to coral reef areas in the Philippines, and it's also you can also see data in the globally. Aside from this, we're also looking at piloting smart tool. I forgot what what it stands for, but it's basically a tool that helps enforcement. So actually, any kind of tool that can help in enforcing our laws, since as what we already know, we have a lot of laws, beautiful laws, but enforcement is really a challenge. So as long as it's accepted, it's easy to apply or use, it's something to consider.
All right, very interesting. And since we're here to discuss the Philippines and France cooperation, I would also like to ask, considering all these technologies and innovations that we are exploring, how do you think can France and Philippines expand their scientific cooperation to create real-time regional marine data sharing platform that could also support biodiversity, enforcement, and diplomacy? What are the areas wherein France and Philippines can work together in ensuring protection of our biodiversity?
Hirap naman ang tanong na yun.
Miss Universe, sir.
Okay, cooperation is always a key part in the work of government, as a whole. We've very early on realized that the mandate of the DNR cannot be implemented without the help of all our stakeholders. In fact, not related to the marine ecosystem, but in terms of terrestrial forests, I want to take this opportunity to announce to everybody on June 26, we are shifting our key strategy in the reforestation of our terrestrial forests from very government-centered national greening program type of work to engaging the private sector as part of investing into terrestrial forest lands. Part of that is reforestation. So I'm hoping that we can do something similar in terms of protection and sustainable development of.
Yes, ma'am.
I think for me, so we have a very big crowd right now, but I think we need bigger crowd that would involve the public to really hear what we're discussing here, what's really, what's the problem, what's the challenge.
Biodiversity data gaps right now? Or what are the most urgent biodiversity data gaps? And how do you think will partnering with France in a scientific partnership help address these concerns? In short, sir, if you need any help from France, now's your time to say it with the ambassador here.
Yeah, I think there are many facets to biodiversity assessments and biodiversity conservation and so on. So we can talk about gaps in technology, we can talk about gaps in the way of expertise, and there are also gaps in terms of how do you prioritize, knowing what's still to be discovered versus knowing more intensively those that are, for example, in danger of extinction. So there are many things, I think. So I think it's just a matter of, more frequent exchanges of information, and maybe out of that, there might be a consensus of, which gaps need to be prioritized.
Would you like to answer?
I'll try to answer that. I think it was Marian who mentioned earlier that for any conservation effort, if you do not involve the community and a sustainable livelihood in that area, there will be no conservation effort that will be effective. And this is what we see in terrestrial forests, in our water resources, and so on. In fact, for the longest time, our group in the DNR have been looking for a sustainable livelihood program for mangrove areas. And I think it will be the same for the coastal area, coral reefs and seagrasses, beyond, of course, ecotourism. We cannot have the entire coral reef area of the Philippines to be ecotourism sites. And therefore, a livelihood component for all these conservation efforts will always have to be in place. And I still long for that sustainable development aspect. Can we do mariculture, for example, that still protects the key areas of a coral reef, or some other form of livelihood that the communities can engage in, and at the same time fund partly the conservation efforts of the area.
All right. I think Dr. Lagman would like to share some of her thoughts. How about, ma'am, if would you like to join us also on stage?
I guess just the question earlier about data gaps and how can we engage the region. One of the things that I think is and I'm stepping aside from the paper, but talking about my experience working in the region and the recent maritime security discussion, the data gaps will always be there. And the more we get data, the more there will be gaps. But what we have right now will be very interesting for two things. One, standards. Second, indices. Because those two things are very, very prominent in the 90s when we didn't have anything and we started working together because we wanted to get those indices in place and methods to be able to come up with them. So it's the difficulty only in the region is that we come together when somebody else is leading us. And then when somebody leaves, we're all gone. We don't move together. But I think it's high time the region is able to bring together with its resources, particularly in this area.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lagman. Do we have any questions from our participants here in the venue? Any question? Okay, yes, Ambassador.
Thank you so much, and thank you, and pardon my ignorance, not being an expert or a scientist, but thinking about maybe policy making and efficiency. I was wondering, after, of course, data collection, which is step one before mapping, then the marine protected areas, what do you see as the main criteria to make those marine protected areas efficient? You have mentioned just one, which is the commitment of the coastal communities. Do you see any other criteria that have proven, or best practices that have proven to be more efficient in some areas of the Philippines or worldwide, that could help also speed up the 30 by 30 commitment? And one particular question I have is the question of the size of the marine protected area. Is there any knowledge, scientifically speaking, where we can assess that it's better to be like small is beautiful or big is more efficient? And I have in mind the comparison with the strategy that Palau, I was mentioning, I was also ambassador to Palau. Palau has chosen to close 80% of its EEZ to be like considered as a whole protected marine protected area. So do you have any specific knowledge on the criteria that make marine protected areas more efficient than others? And the question of the size. Thank you.
Okay, so the question about what's next after data gathering, I think what's important is providing feedback to the community on what the result of the study is. So that's very important because that's the one that would inform them of where to go next. Next is, I think for criteria on MPAs, considering area with all of the represented, with all of the marine ecosystems represented, like the mangrove, the seagrass, and the coral reefs would be a good criteria to consider. So that way we can see connectivity in the protecting an ecosystem that's interrelated to each other.
On size, I have one example in mind, but definitely big is good, but small is more manageable. Sometimes big can also be a deterrent. And I'll give you one example of a terrestrial protected area. And the example I will give you is the Batanes group of islands, which is an entire protected area. When one area is declared a PA, there are certain activities that can no longer be done in that area for conservation purposes. One of which is mining. You can no longer do mining in a protected area. And unfortunately, not many people realize this, but resources coming from mining is also important for development. And a classic case for Batanes is that they cannot make their own roads because they cannot quarry materials, sand and gravel, from their own province. And can you imagine that they will have to barge sand and gravel from Ilocos Norte to Batanes simply because a protected area precludes any type of mining in the area. So that is, to me, too limiting with the end in mind to protect something, but you also hamper development, in the process. So perhaps big is not always good, but make sure that the size is manageable and directed, because as you become bigger, resources also become diluted, in a way.
All right. Thank you, sir. Do we have another question? Yes, sir. So if you can introduce yourself, sir, and the organization.
Hello, good morning. I'm Neil Silva from the University of the Philippines Law Center Institute for Maritime Affairs. This is primarily for Yusek David, but also for the others, for the other speakers. The Philippines has been trying and somehow failing to enact several laws for the planning for actually related to marine spatial planning, particularly the ICM, the Integrated Coastal Management Bill, and the Blue Economy Bill, both of which have not been signed into law. What are the prospects of them in the upcoming Congress? And is there a coordinated effort to build political support for the enactment of these laws for marine planning? Thank you.
Thanks, sir. The MSP is or remains a top priority policy of the DNR. And I think it will continue on even if we change secretaries by the 10th of June. That is the transition date. There's a lot of movement, but because there's a new Congress that's coming in, pretty much we start from scratch all over again. We need champions from both houses to push this as a law. But even before making it into a law, there are efforts towards that particular objective that can be done through administrative orders or even executive orders. And this, I think, should be the strategy moving forward.
All right, thank you. We also have a phone-in question here. I think this is from one of our online participants, also from the media. How can data-driven environmental monitoring be used to document and deter marine degradation caused by unauthorized or destructive activities in the West Philippine Sea? Maybe you can also answer again, sir. Right? How can we use data-driven environmental monitoring to document and deter marine degradation caused by aggressive actions, illegal actions in the West Philippine Sea?
Very good question. And that becomes even more difficult if the area that you are trying to monitor has issues of access. And I think that should be the very first item that we need to tackle. We need access there. In my case, as a researcher, I've only been there once, in the early 2000s with the Marine Science Institute and a group from UP. And I remember even during that time, there were issues with our path being blocked by China. Access is critical. Once there's access, we can put in place regular monitoring, maybe even remote monitoring, but definitely we should be able to access it first.
Which makes me think, sir, because we've been doing joint patrols in some parts of the West Philippine Sea, do you think it's time that we also do joint biodiversity surveillance, perhaps with France or other like-minded nations? What do you think, sir? From BFAR, sir. Do you think it's high time you do that as well? joint biodiversity surveillance with other nations? Because as USEC CP said, access is really the problem right now.
I think all the help that we can get from our strong partners and allies will be most welcome. The trip I made to the Kalayaan group of islands was with Vietnam at that time, because they have their own separate issues with China on the other side of the South China Sea. So we call it the West Philippine Sea. They call it the East Vietnam Sea, on their side. And I think we should do more of that, within the region. But definitely, there's a lot of expertise from other countries, France in particular. We should plan that.
All right. Thank you. Do you have another question? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Susan Amor, also from the Maritime Journalists Association of the Philippines. I'm very curious about what the DNR and the Department of Science and Technology partnership, because I heard that there are many researches being done by the scientists in the DOST, and they wanted to implement it particularly for marine protection and biodiversity, like remote sensing and many others. Can you explore on it, expound on it more?
There are a lot of collaborations, maybe not formally with DOST, but definitely DOST-funded projects. Prior to the DNR, I actually came from DOST. And during my time, we funded several projects, one of which is called ARAS, ARAS, from MSI and Physics Department of UP Diliman. This is essentially an imaging tool that you tow with a bangka. And at the end of your trip, it stitches all these images into a single image, and you can do image processing automatically with that single image. That is a key technology that we are now employing for the mapping of corals and seagrasses. I'm sure there are so many other research, not only coming from UP and De La Salle, but also all other state universities. Definitely collaboration is key, but I also wish to address our researchers to actually be doing research that have direct impact on protection and conservation, and not just for publication purposes.
All right. Dr. Lagman, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, you might want to help us write that paper. No, I'm just joking. There are very important things that I'm picking out right now, which I haven't heard in the past. It seemed like biodiversity in the past was save, protect, don't touch, go away, sort of policy. And I am glad to hear that right now we're actually in the mode of saying, let's try something different. Looking at what I just presented earlier, where I was talking about demand on services and provision of services, do you think such an approach and finding ways of evaluating that situation, this is my first slide earlier, could help in trying to establish something like, should we do marine protected area and ocean cages for aquaculture, or maybe solar farms, alternative energy sources? Because these are the decisions I think that are very hard to make, and so many people have many voices. What do you think of the new environment now, and how welcome those new voices are?
You articulated it properly. And I think that the approach before, as you mentioned, is just simply protect and not do anything in the area. We are forgetting, those of us here living in Metro Manila, that there are communities that rely on these resources. We are isolating them by saying, do not do anything that will affect this environment that we cherish and value. What about their own valuation of that land? And so at least for terrestrial forests, this is now the strategy. And I think maybe some variant of what I will explain to you can be applied to marine areas. The program that will be launched on June 26 is called potential investment areas in forestry. We have identified all forest lands, public forest lands that are now barren. And it's been the mandate of DNR to reforest them. And we have been doing that for the last 12, 13 years, and we are not successful, now, if I may say so. What we now try to do is enjoin the private sector, LGUs, government to invest in these lands, utilize half of the land for other purposes, whether it be timber production, coffee, bamboo, cacao. But the deal is half of that you will have to reforest. So at the end of the day, we are releasing 1 million hectares, 500,000 hectares of that 1 million hectares of barren land will be reforested. Half of it will be developed for economic purposes. And these economic purposes, hopefully, in my mind, will revive the wood industry of the Philippines, which incidentally is so bad that we are now importing 80% of our wood requirements from Malaysia, Vietnam, and of all places, even New Zealand, when in fact we were a strong wood producer in the 1980s. So 60s, up to the 80s. And so if this scheme of balancing development and reforestation works, we hit two birds with one stone, and that is reforestation and putting in place livelihood for communities in the area and increasing economic development, not only locally but nationally. So that's the strategy.
All right. What would you like to answer first? Let's have her answer first, please.
So
Yes.
just to add, this is where public consultations, community consultations really is very important, because it's not just about us, what do you call this? It's not just about us committing or promising to protect 30 by 30, but also balancing this initiative, national initiative, to also benefit local communities. So I've been to a lot of consultations before to protect an island, and I've realized that, so I would get violent reactions, them saying that you, DNR, going to our islands and protecting this, closing this, how about us? How can we have our livelihood? How can we send our kids to school? How can we eat, basically? Every day is a challenge. But if we explain it to them properly, that we will do zoning, we will have core zones, we will have areas for fishing where we can do diving, we can do ecotourism, then they can accept it and negotiate with us in a more civilized manner.
All right. And Dr. Luisma?
Yeah, so back to the question. Researchers actually sort of welcome, that sort of change in mindset, that rather than just, focusing our attention entirely on conservation, that we actually have this duty to explore ways by which our people can actually benefit from resources. Of course, there's a lot of value in conserving for the purpose of ensuring that our ecosystems will continue to deliver ecosystem services. But there are other ways of benefiting from our resources without, compromising their sustainability. And I think this is where technologies can come in, because if we can discover, drugs, for example, or products that can uplift, or improve the well-being of our people, and there are ways of producing them, and there are new technologies of producing them without really extracting them from the wild, then I think there should be greater efforts focused on that too.
All right. Thank you, sir. Ma'am, would you like to add something?
Yeah,
very quickly?
because as a business reporter during the 1990s, there is this thing with the industrial forest management system where an industry will partner with DNR to reforest a certain portion, and then they will harvest it and use it for their industry, like what happened to FIMCO, Philippine Match Company. That is a very key sector during that time in the 1990s. Maybe you could explore that. And also, I want to ask the DNR, who should be monitoring the kaingin system in the entire Philippines? That is one problem that has not been solved through decades.
All right, maybe very quickly, sir, since we're talking about marine biodiversity and we're getting a little sidelined. All right.
I'll speak to
Thank
you
you,
after
Bob.
the event, though. But yes, you're correct. No, the issue of deforestation cannot be blamed to industries such as mining, because the main driver or illegal logging, the main driver there is actually conversion to agricultural lands, including kaingin. And that is precisely why I'm saying that the resources in the area will be compromised if there is no viable livelihood for the people in that community. They see tracts of land and they cannot cut anything or secure anything from that area. What would they do? Would they just remain poor and not be able to feed their children, or cut this in order for them to do agriculture? Same thing, I think, is happening with our marine ecosystem. So that balance, however delicate it may be, will have to be in place. I think that's a key strategy.
Thank you, sir. One more question. Sir, would you like to ask? Okay, and then another one.
This can be a silly question since of being too pedantic. But
If you can introduce yourselves first, sir. Name, please, and organization.
you can call me Dr. Fred, used to be research scientist at the Asian Institute of Technology in Bangkok. This can be a silly question, but to be mechanistic in follow-up to question by Honorable Ambassadrice on parameterizing with a view to establishing KPIs, with a view to standardizing and harmonizing interventions, so that we can benchmark with global best. How many decades, centuries, millennia are we far from this?
Okay.
How far along are we from the global standard, perhaps?
I think standard-wise, we follow international guidelines anyway. But I think there has to be that change in mindset. You see, how government and pretty much the entire sector operates at this point in time, I think, is that we are focused on activities. Did I do the assessment? Did I collect the samples? And so on and so forth. And we lose sight of the actual output and impact that we wish to achieve, because we are bogged down with activities. For example, for DNR, okay, we think, in the past, we think that our job is done once we are able to declare an area a marine protected area. No, that is simply a means towards something that you want to achieve later on. But if we focus on those activities, now this is all about theory of change, impact framework. Now, everyone is familiar with those kinds of framework. If you are bogged down with activities and not look at what you really want to achieve, then we will never get there. And so in DNR, we are switching very slowly towards that kind of mindset. And in order for you to have that impact, you will have to put in the necessary KPIs. No? And KPIs can not be, okay, how many hectares have we surveyed? No, those have not yet have not brought the necessary impact just yet. No, so change in mindset. I hope I answered your question, but this is just a small step, but rather a big change in mindset for a government agency.
All right, and we have one more question.
A pleasant morning to each and everyone. My name is Captain Ronnie Basco from the Philippine Merchant Marine Academy. Please excuse my ignorance because my question is all about in relation with the ship's operation. In terms of ship's operation, we are commonly using the International Convention for the Regulation of Marine Pollution, 73-78. I would like to hear from the honorable speakers. In our current situation here in the Philippines, how are we in terms of policy making, or maybe in protection of our marine biodiversity right now?
Hihirap na mga questions. Please do.
Yes, sir. I am Commodore May Murphy, sir, from the Philippine Coast Guard. I would like to respond to your questions. Our setup with the implementation of international, since we are member states of IMO, we only, when we ratified all the MARPOL 73-78, it is imperative for us to legislate, to put into law. However, as of now, the proposed bill is still in the Congress. Actually, it's been a long time. I don't know if it was filed again, but we're just using a secondary legislation, that is memorandum circulars. So when it comes to waste, it's the Philippine Coast Guard who implement the policies. So we're just now, we in the absence of the law, we're using the memorandum circulars and adopting the provisions of the IMO conventions. Yan na po, sir. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Lagman.
I just wanted to add one thing: climate change. It's the big elephant in the room. It's the big thing that might affect and undermine whatever we're actually doing right now. My question to you is that at the rate we're going right now, we have time to actually go to 30 by 30 in the under 2 degrees target. How hopeful are we that we are actually going to be doing this, and what do we need to be able to make sure that we get there?
Maybe we can help.
You should be the one answering that question, but the task in front of us is huge. You know, the 30 by 30 targets. I'm still hopeful that we can do it, but there are so many things that we can do, small things, before we are able to get there. I've been reading. Sorry, I'm sharing. I've been reading Stoicism lately, and one. I don't know if anyone is reading the same book as I am. And one thing that clicked on my mind, because it's like a daily journal, is that sometimes there are objectives of each one or an entire country that is so big, so lofty a goal that you put in blinders because you want to achieve that very big goal. What the book is saying is that there's nothing bad with achieving small things and even probably even veering away from the general strategy that you put in place, because once you have that strategy, it's so fixed that you don't see anymore these other strategies, and these small wins, I think, is more important than achieving that.
One step at a time.
Sorry.
Yeah. And maybe just to wrap up, I'm so sorry, Doctor. Maybe in the next panel. But just to wrap up the discussion, since I'm being told that we need to wrap up, just to add on the question of Dr. Lagman, what else can we do to make sure that we really achieve the 30 by 30 target from the part of the BFAR and from the civil society sector?
In particular for the DNR and BFAR, I think the coordination, close coordination, and active participation in each of the department's activity is very crucial. So it's really hard sometimes that it's a DNR event, but there's no BFAR representative. It's a BFAR event, but no DNR representative. So I think this is a very important, crucial consideration for our leaders to really make sure that there's participation from each and everyone.
And completely agree.
Marine science, from our marine science sector. What else do you think we need to do to make sure that we achieve the 30 by 30 target? Nothing specific, sir. All right. And on that note, I think let's give our speakers another round of applause, please. Thank you very much, USEC CP David, Dr. Arturo Luisma, and Ms. Marian Saniano. And we're going to have another photo opportunity very quickly with Professor Manhit and the ambassador, please.
The other side.
All right, once again, let's give our panel another round of applause, please. Thank you very much for being generous with your answers. All right. Okay, I think we will now proceed to our second panel. All right, so for our second panel, we will talk about a very timely issue on protecting coastal communities and marine resources, but this time in a changing climate. So that will be our focus for the second panel. Now, this panel will explore how collaboration among governments, communities, and international partners can protect marine resources and build coastal resilience. It will highlight solutions like sustainable fisheries, nature-based strategies, and climate-resilient infrastructure, emphasizing the value of cooperation in addressing environmental challenges. Our first speaker for today is we have actually invited Director Elizer Toto Salilig, the National Director of the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, to join us. But unfortunately, he won't be able to attend today's forum, but he is going to be represented by Attorney Alexandra Aure from the Office of the National Director of the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Attorney Alexandra Aure.
Distinguished guests, partners, and fellow advocates, good morning. It is an honor to join this forum at such a critical time for marine biodiversity and coastal communities whose futures are being reshaped by the climate crisis. The Philippines Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources of the Department of Agriculture stands with all of you in fact. Climate change is no longer a looming threat. It is a daily reality for our fisher folk. Rising sea temperatures, coral bleaching, livelihoods become unstable, and food security become fragile. Situated at the heart of the Coral Triangle, the Philippines is one of the countries that has the highest marine species diversity per unit area, with over 1.3 million hectares of coral reefs, more than 500,000 hectares of seagrass beds, and over 400,000 hectares of mangrove forest. Our diversity is our source of pride and thus requires our undivided devotion. Protecting our marine biodiversity also means protecting coastal communities and the people who depend on it. Mitigating the effects of climate change by utilizing nature-based solutions, particularly from the oceans, remind us of the ultimate power of nature to heal. As stewards of the environment, we must ensure that this natural process remains unhampered and secure a sustainable future where biodiversity continues to thrive. Across the country, we are working to build resilience at the source. Through our fisheries and coastal resource management initiatives, we support community-led efforts, such as the establishment of marine protected areas, or MPAs, and the implementation of closed fishing seasons to facilitate stock recovery. We have collaborated with local government units, fisher folk associations, and non-governmental organizations to implement these initiatives in ways that reflects grassroots needs. Because community buy-in is not a bonus. It is a prerequisite for success. We have expanded our national stock assessment program to ensure that decisions are based on actual conditions in water, not mere assumptions. We promote participatory resource assessments and vulnerability mapping to align science with local ecological knowledge. We are also inventing in ecosystem-based adaptation, integrating climate risk into coastal planning and building capacity at the community level. In areas most vulnerable to storms and sea level rise, we push for climate resilient infrastructure through the FB Pagbabago program and implement approaches like mangrove rehabilitation, seaweed farming, and sustainable aquaculture. BIFAR is committed to empowering fisherfolk with training, access to resources, and platforms where their voices shape the decisions that affect their future. Our goal is not just to adapt to climate change, but to equip our communities to thrive despite it. However, we also recognize the broader landscape. Safeguarding marine biodiversity requires enforcement, funding, and lasting coordination. More than 1,800 MPAs exist in the Philippines, but some are obscure state of implementation. We need stronger institutional linkages, innovative financing, and sustained community-driven management to translate these into real ecological gains. We know what's at stake. For BFAR, protecting coastal communities means ensuring fisherfolk can withstand and adapt to the realities of changing climate. This is why we value our partnership with France, built on shared priorities in marine protection, innovation, and inclusive development. Together, we can deliver concrete solutions that preserve our ocean resources and support the people who depend on them. Maraming salamat po.
All right, thank you very much, Attorney Alexandra Aure. Our next speaker is the Deputy Chief of Coast Guard Staff for Marine Environmental Protections, or CG9, of the Philippine Coast Guard. Let us all welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Coast Guard Commodore May Marfil.
Kinakabahan ako. But it's my second time to present in this forum. To Her Excellency Marie Fontanel, Ambassador, Embassy of France in the Philippines. Good morning, ma'am. To our distinguished guests, partner agencies, fellow advocates for marine environmental protection, good morning. Let me present to you the PCG, Philippine Coast Guard's vital role in the changing climate. So the scope of my, next slide please. So the scope of my presentation is the introduction, our authority in adaptation and mitigation efforts being conducted by the Philippine Coast Guard, interagency cooperation, and my conclusion. Next slide, please. So we all know that you have gathered here to have a meaningful discussions about climate change and its effects, and hoping to identify a pragmatic solutions that will address the impact of climate change. So the UN have identified the following effects of climate change. So thus the PCG are focusing its adaptation and mitigation efforts on severe storms, hotter temperatures, a warming, rising ocean, and the loss of species, maritime law enforcement, maritime search and rescue, maritime safety, marine environmental protection, and maritime security. So, in our next slide, please. So, in our mitigation and adaptation efforts, we are strengthening our maritime safety and search and rescue capability. Climate change is leading to more frequent and severe weather events, such as typhoons and extreme sea conditions, that the PCG has strengthened its maritime safety and search and rescue capability through the following: ensure the seaworthiness of Philippine registered vessel through pre-departure inspection, vessel safety inspection, and emergency readiness evaluation of the crew. So in line with this, in coordination with PAG-ASA, a timely dissemination of marine weather bulletin to all ships and watercrafts to ensure that no vessel will sail during adverse weather condition in order to prevent sea accidents, loss of life, and environmental catastrophe. The PCG is also establishing its readiness for mass maritime search and rescue, drafting a contingency plan because our country is often visited by cruise ship. So it is one of the findings of the IMSS audit, so that we have to draft our mass rescue plan for if there's accident caused by brought by cruise ship. So also the PCG has increased its number of personnel and floating assets Currently, the strength of PCG is more than 30,000 and growing, and will be acquiring more floating assets. And several of them will come from the courtesy of the French government. Thank you, ma'am. And to cater the needs of our public. Next slide, please. Considering our marine environment is heavily impacted by the climate change, the PCG has improved its readiness and response to oil and HNS spill by improving our response system. This was proven in our response in the recent maritime incident brought by MTKR Terra Nova, with carrying 1.4 million liters of bunker oil. However, it has a minimal oil spillage. We established also the Task Force Ingat Yaman Dagat to strengthen the marine environmental protection. This initiative aims to combat marine pollution, protect marine life, and foster a sustainable relationship between people and their marine environment. The PCG has continuously conducted mangrove planting to the different areas of the country to support biodiversity. As you can see, every year we're conducting mangrove planting, so it is part of the activities of our Coast Guard districts. Recently, we have initiated the Coral Reef Rehab in collaboration with the Western Philippine University for the purpose of assisting the recovery, promoting resilience, and restoring the ecological functionality of coral reefs in the West Philippine Sea. Next slide, please. We also intensify our maritime security law enforcement by increasing the maritime and coastal security patrol. So rising oceans, temperatures, and increased acidity can make it harder for fish to survive and reproduce, leading to declining fish population. Changing oceans, currents, and water temperatures can also force fish to migrate to new areas, making it difficult for local fishermen to find them. This can drive fishers to engage in IU fishing to supplement their income because they are unable to adapt to changing conditions. So through our increased maritime and coastal security patrol, as of last 2024, we're able to apprehend 193 vessels for the IUU. Also, we are enhancing our monitoring capability. We're using our Sea Vision map, Sea Vision, and IORIS. We also established Task Force Lambat as one of the marching orders of the President that will elicit activities and intensify the enforcement relevant maritime laws, both international and domestic, and to combat the above mentioned threats in the Philippine jurisdiction. Next slide, please. The PCG have partnered and built strong relationship with these government agencies to implement its different efforts in the mitigation and adaptation of the effects of climate change. This includes, but not limited to, sharing of information, coordinating operations, and developing joint strategies. So in conclusion, the PCG is not just a maritime safety and security agency, but also a key player in addressing the challenges of climate change and ensuring the long-term sustainability of the Philippine maritime domain. The PCG, as your steward of our waters, the PCG will remain steadfast in its mission that is protecting our people, preserving our marine environment, and securing our shared tomorrow. As I end my presentation, I want to share the statement from Christine Lagarde of climate change. Climate change is a collective endeavor. It's a collective accountability and may not be too late. Thank you for your attention and good morning, everyone.
Thank you very much, Commodore May Marfil. We have another speaker joining us today, and he is the country director of the Conservation International Philippines Foundation Incorporated. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Mr. Wilson John Barbon.
Good morning, everyone. Just a rejoinder on our Marine 30 by 30. I think earlier there was a discussion about where we are on our Marine 30 by 30. Our baseline for our targets is at 2%. And with a consortium with CI and the MPA support network, we're able to identify 15%. It's still not 30%, but still a huge jump from the current 2% of marine protection that we have in country. And that really requires us to take a whole of society approach to achieve even our target, even if we fell short of the 30% of our marine waters, 15% still like a real ambitious target, in the next 5 to 6 years. Yeah, it's just so now to my notes. So I'd like to start my sharing about the work of Conservation International back about 20 years ago. And the first time I had to work in a marine environment, I was working with Project Seahorse for a while in Cebu and Bohol. And the founder of the organization, Dr. Vincent, as a requirement for all of the newly recruited staff, we have to join a lantern fishing trip in the island of Handayan and Hitape, Bohol, for us to really experience the complexity of conservation. Sometimes I studied biology in the university, but I spent a lot of time doing community organizing and social mobilization. And sometimes we miss, the fish are cute, the corals are colorful, but for fishers and communities, they are survival. Their language is about surviving. They look at these resources as more of for economic activities rather than science, data, and all the things that excites us, many in this room. So that experience, the seahorse fishing is very tedious. You start at 9 in the evening all the way to 3 in the early morning because seahorses are nocturnal animals. So the trip was like a makeshift non-motorized boat with a makeshift like plywood for fins, and then the mast, and then a makeshift spear. So we wade all the way to the shallow reefs of the Nahon Double Barrier Reef in Bohol, collecting whatever this lantern fisher. So I'd like to start that because that was my first experience about these complex interactions of people and nature. So for example, there's like a lot of habitat loss we're seeing. I cannot cite the statistics, but we've seen a lot of mangrove loss, coral loss of our coral reefs. And that's not so much about, climate change is a culprit, but there's also like a lot of land conversion. There's a lot of unbridled infrastructure development along the coastline. And then you have your natural hazards and you have your climate change. But also there are a lot still back in the day in Bohol, there's still like a lot of blast fishing and troll fishing in the shallow waters where it contributed to the decimation of our reefs. So, and then you have your overfishing. We have problems of overfishing, not just there's mainly caused by illegal, underreported fishing, but it's also about the continued fight for resources between small-scale fishers and the commercial fishing industry, which is something that we are still seeing today, right? Fighting for that piece of marine waters of who really has the right to fish in our waters. And, and then we don't have like a lot of regulation locally. I'm sure that at the national level, there's been discussions about regulating fisheries, but the cause of our overfishing, it's a combination of habitat loss, but also like real efficiency in our fishing. I heard someone before that we have already invented the most efficient fishing gear to catch the last fish in the Philippines. We're so efficient in finding ways of catching fish that, it contributed to that. And then we have also our transboundary issues, not just like for defense issues, national defense issues, but real transboundary issues around, the illegal fishing trade, the wildlife trade that cuts across using our marine resources to be the conduit of all of these activities, within our neighbors in the ASEAN. So marine conservation, building climate resilience, it does not only require the good science, good technology, a lot of data, but it requires all of us, politicians, economists, finance experts, government, to really work together in addressing these complex issues. So some of the work that we're doing at CI, in the Philippines, where we have been promoting locally managed marine protected areas, really banking on the opportunity provided by the Fisheries Code, which gives power to municipal governments to establish marine protected areas. I like the idea about big and small. We can have large-scale marine protected areas like in the West. We have square kilometers of protected areas, but if you cannot manage them, what's the point, right? So for us at CI, we believe if it's community managed, small scale, 50 hectares, 200 hectares, but if they can manage it, and then if they are formed in a network, then there will be more effective. We've also brought the idea of marine protected areas to address political concerns. So one example we've had in Timor-Leste, Indonesia. We know the political story of the two countries. And we use marine protected areas, shared marine protected areas as peace parks, where they will try to mend their differences through the conservation of nature and the marine ecosystems. We're also working around fisheries management, CI, through the BFAR's fisheries management area, advising the government on the science like catch control, gear regulation, and all. And then finally, I would say that one of the maybe not so common in many environmental NGOs is that CI, we are putting innovative finance as an important aspect of conservation work. And some of the ideas, some of the things that we are doing around innovative finance is some have failed, some are currently in pilot stage. Some that has more challenging was around insurance and mangroves. So it's something that we've really tried, but lack of success. Perhaps when the context changes, maybe there will be more success there. But also we're piloting some work, and through the French support, right? We are expecting support from the AFD to sustain our nature credits support for Tubataha reefs, which is meant of quantifying biodiversity in Tubataha and then finding a way of valuing that where it becomes attractive for private sector to invest, in order for them to satisfy their compliance requirements. So yeah, I think there are more room for collective action in the Philippines. So legislation is one. There are a number of priority legislation that we also want to support, like the national land use. For many years, decades, we have no national land use and water use plan. There is a pending coastal greenbelt bill that I hope it will be refiled in the next Congress, because that would really rationalize our mangrove and seagrass and coral protection. The biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction is a good opportunity for us to, the West Philippine Sea is very challenging, but the eastern side of the Philippines, like the Philippine Rice, the Benham Bank, these are still areas where we can still have the opportunity to be well positioned in not just for national security concerns, but also for biodiversity and fisheries management. So yeah, and then maybe a policy around innovative finance. There are a number of areas there that can be unlocked, like rights, for example, for blue carbon. Who owns the blue carbon rights? Something that's very not clear. The concerns around fish ponds and mangroves and fish ponds. That's a BFAR and DNR discussion. So these are areas where at CI we continue to engage government with civil society and partners. And even our international partners to really work with everyone so that we can address these concerns. So I'll stop there and maybe more in the panel discussions. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Wilson John Barbon. Our final speaker for this panel is the Chief Executive Officer of Blue Alliance. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Dr. Nicolas Pascal. Oh, okay, he's joining us via Zoom. All right, Dr. Pascal, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right, we can see you. Do you hear us, sir?
Okay. Can you hear me? Or?
There, we can hear you. You may proceed with your presentation, sir.
You can see the okay. So let's start. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I will try to keep the time as it be. I am the last presentation. So I think today I'm going to present you one of the solutions we have for these thousands of MPAs we have in Philippines, run with the LGUs and also run with other authorities like BIFA, DNR, and running with the PNP and PCG. The 1,000 MPAs or more that we have in the Philippines, unfortunately, at what we call paper parks. Okay, they have been designated. Some of them are managed, but most of them are on the paper. Okay, they are underfunded. The bantai dagats are not paid. There's not real enforcement. There's not real compliance with the fishers. There's not real work on the municipal waters to enforce these MPAs or to enforce the fishery regulation in the whole municipal waters. Okay, so we don't expect to find a solution for the 1,000 MPAs, but we think we found one solution for at least a big number of them. Okay, so this is what I'm going to present you. This is our program. It has been developed in the last 5 years in the Philippines, and it's going to be there for the next 50 or 100 years, I hope so. Okay, so Blue Alliance, really we have one vision. Our vision is for local fishers to earn a sustainable income from fishing. So and where a lot of the world coral reefs that were threatened by blast fishing or other kind of illegal fishing are really teeming with life. Okay, this is our vision, and this is what we are progressing to. Today, Blue Alliance, we're not a big NGO like CI. We think small is beautiful. We try to keep it in 3 countries. We are in Philippines, in Indonesia, and in Tanzania. We manage almost 2 million hectares of MPAs with government to regenerate coral reef and improve the livelihoods of fishers. What we do, and I will come back to this, is that we have a solution to finance these MPAs and to create a blue economy around the MPAs to generate jobs for the fishers, to generate jobs for the communities living around these conservation areas through what we call reef positive businesses, which are some kind of social enterprises in the blue economy. I will come back to this. And we set up a blended finance facility to finance all this, mixing grants, refundable grants, and impact loan to finance these MPAs and these reef positive businesses. So the model we have developed and what we have done in the Philippines the last 5 years is really, we start from here in the center. We have the MPA co-management entities, and I will come back to this, or what we have today in the Philippines. These MPA co-management entities have obviously a positive impact on nature, people, and climate. Okay, I will not come back to this. I think it has been properly explained. But they have an issue with MPAs. They cost money, okay, to enforce people on the sea, to talk with the fishers all the time, to monitor the impacts of these MPAs. And we're not talking only about the MPAs, we're also talking about municipal waters, okay? We cannot think only 30 by 30. We have to earn 100 by 30, okay, by 2030. So we need 100% of sustainable fishing in all the municipal waters, okay? So this costs money, okay? We have to find a solution for this money. Also, what we have also is a lot of resistance from the fishers to implement MPAs or to implement sustainable fishing because it's the livelihood, okay? So in that sense, they have to develop a blue economy in these conservation areas at large scale. Okay, we're not thinking about small hectares here. We are thinking of large scale, and this is what we have developed in the Philippines. We have a reef positive business in aquaculture. We have developed a community-based regenerative aquaculture of mangrove crabs and of sea cucumber. We have developed an ecotourism. We have two solutions for ecotourism with a coral safari, for example. And we have developed, or we are in development of an enterprise in sustainable seafood called Samaki Blue, where we can transform, fillet, and sell some of the fish of high-end value, of a high-value fish, fish by these fishers. And these businesses obviously have a direct positive impact on nature, on people, obviously they create jobs, and on climate. They can restore mangroves, or we can protect some seagrass with the sea cucumber, for example. But more important is that we own these companies. Okay, they are owned by a non-profit. Okay, and this non-profit means that all the profits of these companies, they are bankable, they are investable, will come back to the MPA. Okay, this is the bet we have, and this is where we are going. We have already generated some of the revenues coming back to the MPAs, and we think that in 5 years, these companies will be profitable enough to maintain the MPAs we have under our management in the Philippines. So as I mentioned, the MPAs we are co-managing, it's a co-management with the LGU, but it's also a whole task force with all the authorities on the sea in the Philippines. So it's also, we have also an MOU with BIFA, we are very close with a PNG, we're close also with a PNP, and we're also obviously working with a PCSD in Palawan. It's a lot of acronym, I'm sorry. So this is where we are in Mindoro, where we are in Philippines. We have two networks. All of them are in key biodiversity areas. Okay, we are protecting some of the most critical coral reefs in the Philippines. We are facing major local threats. We are facing steel explosive, poison, compressor, overfishing, total poaching. So there are things to do, okay? We have works to do, and this is what our rangers have been doing. So in these two networks, you can see the size here. We're not talking about very, very small, but large-scale MPAs. We have supplied them with compliance facilities like speedboats, traditional vessels, ranger stations. We have also permanent staff from Blue Alliance, but working also with staff from the LGU or staff from BIFA or PNP. We have community rangers, the Bandai Dagat, working in Mindoro and in Palawan. And for example, this is what the number of MPAs that we are running in this localization. But as I mentioned, we are not only focusing on the MPA, we are also looking outside of the MPA in the whole municipal waters. So you have the name of the LGUs here, and this is something that we are running for more than 3 years or 4 years now, and we are expanding in Palawan more in the south. Okay, just to give you an idea about what the main activities that we are implementing are really on community based. Okay, so we're doing a lot of work in the community development, working with livelihood, but also community engagement and community awareness. We're doing compliance with the authorities. So we co-patrol the MPAs and the large municipal waters with the local authorities. And I think this is a big difference between a paper park and a no paper park. So here, basically, we stop the poachers with a compliance, but we stop the poaching with a community development. Okay, and we monitor what we do with the science and conservation. I heard before in the presentation that we were talking about KPI. So this is something which is we are reporting to government, to DNR, BIFA, and other agencies, but also to our donors and investors. We have developed 6 KPIs, 2 on biodiversity, 2 on people, 1 on carbon, and 1 on the blue economy. Okay, and these KPIs are reported every year. Okay, we monitor what we do. We check how we recovering the fish biomass, how many coral reef we are protecting, how many jobs we have created, how many livelihood we are enhanced. And this performance, these KPIs are verified. Okay, they're not only us telling, oh, how good we are. All of these are measured and verified by a third-party agency. And I think I will stop here. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Nicolas Pascal. All right, at this point, we will now proceed to our panel discussion. So if I may invite back on stage our speakers, Attorney Alexandra Aure, Commodore May Marfil, Mr. Wilson John Barbon, and also Dr. Pascal. Are you still joining us, sir, for the panel discussion? All right, that's great, sir. Space for Dr. Pascal. Okay, thank you. All right. So, good morning. Very interesting presentations. So for my first question, allow me, I would like to connect what we discussed in our first panel, which Dr. Pascal actually alluded to earlier, and also to our discussion, to some of the speeches that you delivered. Maybe we can start with BFAR. BFAR is central to fisheries regulation. So in terms of balancing the need of the locals, especially in terms of their needs, livelihood needs, and also the need to protect our environment, how does BFAR ensure complementarity between sustainable fisheries and MPA enforcement?
So BFAR as the forefront in regulating fisheries, we are directly in connection with the fisherfolk communities that we encounter and visit every time we deploy new projects. So in deploying new projects and creating projects for the fisherfolk community, we listen, we do public consultations, we, as much as possible, address the current problems that they encounter, especially with climate change, since their catch or the amount of their catch is being dictated or now unpredictable because of the changes in the weather. So during in the rollouts of our project, we want to do public consultations so we can ensure that our projects are direct to the point, addressing their current concerns, and emphasize that while we have a goal, a scientific goal, 30 by 30, we do not forget that our fisher folk is one of the most important and vulnerable, that's correct, sectors in our community.
All right. And also, if I may ask Mr. Wilson and also Dr. Nicholas, Conservation International and also Blue Alliance have done extensive work on nature-based solutions. So how do you ensure that ecosystem restoration efforts deliver both biodiversity and also livelihood gains for locals?
Yeah, I think the direct, simple approach there would be engaging those communities to be the ones implementing activities for restoration. So, for example, at CI, we provide some grants to indigenous peoples, fishing groups to be the one to establish nurseries and plant these trees and all. We have an approach there is a conservation agreement approach where so they get like stipend or compensation for their labor of doing day-to-day job of planting and taking care of the nurseries, but there are also livelihood support. But those livelihood support are have a condition on conservation. So they can only get this livelihood support if they continue to protect and conserve that patch of area that are assigned to them. So that's the approach of balancing. And even in the identification of areas where we do conservation, where we do restoration, it has to undergo community negotiations, because these are areas are also access for fishing and livelihood. So it's not just like driven by science and data and all, but it's also like what's the willingness of the community, because what's the point of designating an area and then your number one violators are community members, and CI will not be there 24 hours to guard that area. So what works, it's a negotiation between the science and communities, and really like a lot of education activities as well.
Make them productive allies in this
Exactly.
campaign. Dr. Pascal, would you like to share your experience as well?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, I want to mention that I am at distance, but in the room you have 2 or 3 members of Blue Alliance. So you please reach out to them if you want more information. I don't know if they can raise their hand or something like this. In terms of restoration, we have a very specific approach in Blue Alliance. Okay, we are convinced that a coral reef restoration or mangrove restoration has to be limited to few cases. We must focus our effort first on reducing the threats on these ecosystems. Okay, it's not worth it to spend a lot of dollars in restoring ecosystems if tomorrow they're going to be destroyed again. Okay, so first we face the threats, why they were destroyed or why they were damaged in the first time. Once we have this, like for example, fish bombing, once we reduce the fish bombing, it's very important to restore these coral reefs, for example. So that's the approach we have. We don't restore before we solve the issue why they were destroyed first.
All right, thank you, Dr. Pascal. My question for the Philippine Coast Guard. The PCG plays a key role in marine environmental protection, as you showed earlier in your presentation, ma'am. What are the current enforcement help? Maybe also how can working with like-minded nations like France help address these gaps?
Though it's part of our maritime security law enforcement, actually, it's the coordination and the lack of the resources, because it's a bigger marine protected area, the areas to monitor with. So sometimes we have resources, but it's not enough really to monitor the whole areas. So that's why we coordinate with the local government units and the BFAR for the implementation of fisheries law.
Since you talked about resources, I would like to ask about financing reforms, because I think one of the main topics of the paper or of the joint policy brief that's being developed right now is the need for financing reforms. Perhaps Dr. Pascal can help us address this. What do you think are mechanisms that can sustainably fund marine protected areas and coastal protection initiatives beyond project-based grants, sir?
Oh, wow. I have hope. How long do I have? I mean, okay, the sea, the ocean is a public good, okay? So it has to come from government. Nonetheless, the public and private partnership is a very good option, okay? We are demonstrating that when it is done with a non-profit entity, we can find this kind of agreement. We are working very, very closely with BFAR. We are working very, very closely with PNP and PCG. So with the right rules, with the right safeguards, we can work, government and NGO can work together, but not only on a project base, on a real long-term base, okay? And this is the kind of thing where we can help. We obviously, we have access to additional resources that the government don't have, okay? The private donors, the philanthropists, the private sector, they don't want always to give money to government, because there's an issue of trust, there's an issue of transparency, there's an issue of efficiency also. When you want to buy your pencil, you need to fill 3 forms. I can buy a pencil much easier. So there's pros and cons, and I think the PPP is one of the options we have to explore and we have to develop more in the future.
Yeah. Attorney Auri, would you like to comment on what he said also about projects with BFAR, also PPP? Yeah.
The BFAR is closely working with PCG and other organizations to forward the cause and the rights of our fisherfolk community. And we want to highlight that our projects are usually born out of the necessity of our fisherfolk community. For example, we have launched FB Pagbabago, wherein a banner program of the DABFAR, wherein we provide fiberglass boats to fisherfolk communities. These are climate resistant machineries and paraphernalia to aid their livelihood. And also we have ice subsidies, fuel subsidies. It's a new concept, or we may not have heard of ice subsidies, but this is important in reducing costs or reducing the loss in the catch of our fisherfolk community. So last week, we are very proud that we have launched the Kadiwa ng Bagong Bayaning Mangingisda with the support of PCG, wherein we will be able to deploy MV Malakaya, wherein this boat will contain buyers of the fresh catch of our fisher folks. So we already cut the losses for our fisher folk community and increase the value of their catches. So we are very proud with this banner programs, and we hope to continue and deploy more MVs and boats for this one.
That's very good to hear, because I remember in our previous Blue Talks discussion, I think it was the previous forum, one civil society group really raised that issue of losses incurred by local fishermen because of the spoilage of the fish that they catch. So ice is very important. Yes, sir, would you like to add?
Yeah, and on the topic of finance, one of the things that we at CI, this has not been done in the Philippines, but I think piloted in Indonesia, is what we call a protection production model for financing. And I think for the Philippines, there is an opportunity for us to do that, given that we now have the PENCAS law. Because in the protection production model is that once you have the economic numbers of the blue economy and look at that at a certain seascape, for example, the Verde Island Passage, where there's a lot of industry, there's a lot of tourism, a lot of shipping, if there is some economic quantification of the value of doing business in the Verde Island Passage and the required financing to conserve it, protect the marine protected areas, provide sustainable livelihoods, there might be a way where there will be like large-scale financing where we can leverage government guarantees to get Green Climate Fund or the Global Environment Facility. So these are the one in Indonesia, it was like provided with some assurances from the Green Climate Fund, provided the government guarantees. And then, so some roles that we can play, like CI, that's also the role that we also love to play, bring stakeholders together, discuss, we love to talk with banks and so we're not just, our name is Conservation International, but we're not like hardcore conservationists, but we also love to find solutions with, the different sectors. So yeah, I think that's something that, in the Philippines with the PENCAS law, I think that's really will unlock opportunities in the future.
All right, thank you, sir. Do we have questions from our audience here? Yes, Dr. Baleva, please.
Hi, I'm Chris Baleva, and I'm a non-resident fellow of Stratbase. I was supposed to ask this earlier, but I can ask this now since, Yeah, you mentioned PENCAS, and I was about to ask about PENCAS. PENCAS is the Philippine Ecosystems and Natural Capital Accounting Act. I understand that the IRR of the PENCAS law has already been adopted just a couple of days ago, I think. So my question is for the BIFAR. My first question, and of course the other panelists can answer as well. I'm wondering if there are already initiatives in mind to implement PENCAS now that we already have the IRR. It was mentioned earlier at the previous discussion that knowing, you can't protect what you don't know. So part of knowing is PENCAS. So if there are initiatives already in mind from the various government agencies that will be working on PENCAS, and of course it has to be a multi-governmental effort. And if communities are also in mind when implementing PENCAS, because they're actually on the ground and would be able to give a lot of data. Thank you.
Even before the enactment of PENCAS, BIFAR has been in the forefront in dissecting the law and thinking of ways how we will incorporate it in our projects. And it was mentioned that what will be the effect of PENCAS on a community level, and we would like to circle back on the whole of the nation approach or strategy that the BIFAR is implementing. So it is a cooperation between LGUs, private sector, fisherfolk community, and government agency in spearheading sustainable projects and sustainable projects. Yes. So yes, this feels like a thesis talaga. So yes, to answer the question, we have the community in mind in the event that we will adopt or we will roll out projects in consideration of the PENCAS. Yes.
Mr. Barbon, yes,
Yep. I haven't seen the implementing rules and all yet, but something that we're really interested to look at. Let's see, not from the government side of things, but from former USAID funded project, CBOL. I don't know if you heard, they did a pilot on natural capital accounting in Bohol, I think in Palawan. They have a manual already called Sukat ng Kalikasan. So probably that's a good area, an academic exercise there on. But I love that toolkit because it's really inclusive. It combines data values from communities, local governments. So it's not just like looking at, like volume of produce coming out from that ecosystem, but it's really about indigenous peoples. They've really been part of that discussion. So I would, if you want to do more about how to operationalize the SNK, Sukat ng Kalikasan, be a good start. And that's also the reason why I wanted to see the implementing rules to see the operation side of things.
All right, Commodore, would you like to add some more?
Yes, ma'am. I was just informed the approval of the PENCAS law, of the passage of the PENCAS law. But whatever the law requires from the Philippine Coast Guard, we are willing and ready to collaborate to the agency that is be the frontliner for that implementation of PENCAS law. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have a final question? I'm being told we can wrap up now, but if we have one more question, or maybe just to we can wrap it up already. What do you think are, I asked this in the first panel earlier, but very quickly, what are enforcement innovations or technologies that we can use to enhance our marine protected area, MPA protection in the Philippines? What do you think? And how can cooperation with between the France and the Philippines and other like-minded nations help ensure protection of our MPAs?
I guess for the monitoring system, I think our IORS and our Sea Vision monitoring, like more CCTVs, because marine protected areas is just close to the coast. So more CCTVs, the monitoring system, I guess, because it is very, what do you call this, efficient. No need more persons to employ more personnel to be used to conduct enforcement. You just need cameras and monitoring system. I think that's what the innovation that can be implemented in the enforcement for marine protected areas.
Attorney Aura, very quickly, innovations on the part of DFAR.
Yes. Aside from the necessity of a monitoring system, we would like to tap into communication devices, not only with or in between agencies, but also to our fisher folk community. Because BFAR believes that our fisher folks are our first defenders in our maritime territory. So if our fishermen and fisher folks are fishing in our territories, it gives it's a testament that we own, or at least we exploit this territory that we have. So we would like to look into the communication between BFAR and our fisher folk community, because they're on the ground, they know what's happening, and they can be very valuable when it comes to giving info on what they see, what they saw, what they're seeing. So that's
all right. Dr. Pascal first, very quickly. Sir, are you still with us?
Very quickly. Yeah, very quickly. I think first of all, we have a dream that technology is going to solve our issues. So first of all, I think we need a long-term strategy to stop the poaching. But in the short term, to stop the poachers, we need technology. We have a lot of MPAs close to the shore, but we have some MPAs very remote. So we are using satellite monitoring. We have a lot of poachers that are commercial fishing. Okay, we have a lot of issues today with a new government regulations about the commercial fishing. But the commercial fishing we need this kind of satellite monitoring. So this is something we are partnering with BFAR, working on this, and this is something where we can intervene. Okay. Beside this kind of technology, we need some very basic tools on the field, like night vision or this kind of thing. The fishers are very wise, okay? They find the ways to poach every time. So unfortunately, we have to be wiser than they are, and we need technology. That's it.
All right. Thank you, sir. And finally?
The first one will be technology also. Like, if there is three things that I would say and ask for our development partners, including France and other, developed nations supporting the Philippines. One would be more support around the use of technology like AI, space technology, so that we can be more efficient in our even mapping and understanding our resources and all. The other one, support perhaps would be around clarification or areas, because the Philippines, we have evolved to, our policy environment is highly evolved if it's an organism, right? It's so complex, overlapping jurisdictions, that sometimes you are, let's say, paralyzed with so much regulations and all that you can't do anything. So I think efforts that would clarify those overlaps would be really important for the Philippines if we're going to do something good for our marine environment. And maybe the final thing would be about magnification. And I think this is what France is trying to do with the Philippines, bringing our interests, bringing our concerns to global platforms like the UNOC next week. Like, I think this Blue Talks is, I attended the launch of this partnership last year, and now I think I've attended the last of because the UNOC is already next week. So developed countries, our development partners can really help us magnify our concerns. And so I really appreciate this effort of listening to stakeholders, and bringing government and civil society and private sector together. So.
All right, and on that note, let us give our speakers a round of applause, please, for that very insightful discussion. And if we can have a quick photo opportunity before we close the program, may we invite Professor Manhit and Ambassador Fontanelle, please. And I think Dr. Pascal, if you can turn on your camera so you can still join the photo.
That's right.
Yes, technology is bridging us today as well. All right, let's give them another round of applause, please. Thank you very much to Attorney Alexandra Aure. Thank you, ma'am. Commodore May Marfil, Mr. Wilson John Barbon, and to Dr. Nicholas Pascal. And I think that concludes our program for today. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this morning. But before you go, we would like to invite you to our next forum. This one is a very important one, which we do annually. By July, it's actually July 12, but by July 11, we will be having a big conference to celebrate the 9th year of the arbitral victory. Our conference is going to be called Defending the Rules-Based Order through Reinforced Defense Capabilities and Partnerships. And we will be having like-minded nations join us during that very important conference, including France. So we hope to see you there again. That's on July 11 at the Manila Polo Club, here as well. All right. I think that ends our program for today. Once again, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We hope you learned a lot in our discussions. And we have lunch prepared for everyone. All right, we can stay in the room until 12, or yeah, we can stay in the room until we finish eating lunch. All right, thank you very much, everyone. We hope you have a great rest of the day. Hello. For everyone who's staying at table 2, you will be having plated lunch.